Hello and welcome to What Lingers, the podcast where we uncover the questions behind people's stories. I'm Cristian Figueroa.
And I'm Liz Melchor, and we are the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, where once a month, 10 storytellers get on stage in front of 200 people and tell true and personal stories related to a theme.
It is always a great event, but there is a catch. We always have lingering questions for the storytellers and no format to ask them. Until now.
In this second season of What Lingers, we invite storytellers to revisit and listen back to their original story from that night, and then sit down with us for a conversation to uncover what lingers for us all.
Just a heads up, the recording of the story you will hear comes from the actual stage of Storytelling Lisboa, so the sound might be a little bit fuzzy. Liz, I have to tell you that this is one of my favorite episodes in the last seasons of Storytelling Lisboa, because as a spiritual person, we have everything here. We have TV shows, we have spiritual things going on, we have love. I mean, just a Cancerian as myself, I just love this episode.
Okay, I just have to make a funny comment because you were like, we have all the spiritual things, and then the first thing you said is TV shows, and that cracked me up. It's like all those spiritual things, TV shows. But I know what you're talking about, and I know what you're talking about, and soon I think the listeners will understand too. But this story was extremely, extremely touching for me. And I just remember being in the room and hearing it, and the whole room was just sort of very silent, very listening. And it was just full of emotion. And I definitely had tears coming down my face.
We all were crying. We were all crying with this episode. Yeah, totally. Loved it.
So I will now turn it over to our storyteller, Hania.
Too many Korean dramas, but I never expected one to change my life. Now, if you've watched as many as I have, you start to see the patterns, like love, cherry blossoms and snow mean love. If someone puts meat on top of rice, it means they're accepting you, all kinds of things. And one of the themes that runs through them a lot is fate. So there are couples that are destined to be together over continents and times and lifetimes and generations. And they also talk to people who've died a lot. They introduce new partners to them, they have annual ceremonies for them, and they ask them to guide their lives after they're gone. So I don't personally believe in fate or that the people who have died are here helping us along, but I will say that life throws out some pretty interesting coincidences. So my boyfriend Bill and I met in our 50s, but our paths had crossed many times before that. Among other things, he had only ever posted 3 photos of his son playing soccer. And one day he called me over and he said, "Isn't that Khalil in the background?" And Khalil is my son. And sure enough, my son was in the background of all 3 photos, even though it was years before we met. They didn't go to the same school, and they weren't even playing in the game that day together. So there were lots of things like that. So we met later on in life, and it was a little bit bittersweet that we met later. So my life hadn't necessarily been the easiest up until then. I'd had abusive parents, bad relationships, a nasty divorce and custody battle, that kind of thing. I loved being a mom, but I was a single parent from the time my son was 8 months old. But I'd done my work, and I was thriving, and I was in a really good place when we met. But somehow meeting Bill made me realize in a different way all of the things that I'd missed, and in a deeper way. So I was so happy in the present, and I was so excited about the future, but I still had this longing, like I wish I had known him for decades and not just years. And I think that combination of all those things was best captured on a placard in a coffee shop. And it said, "I wish I had done everything on earth with you." And it was a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I immediately snapped a picture of it and sent it to Bill. And then a couple years later, I also posted it online with a tribute to Bill exactly 1 month after he died. So Bill was an extraordinary human being. It was like there wasn't anything he couldn't do. He was a down-to-earth architect. As he would say, he wasn't a starchitect. He loved helping people. He knew how to build houses with his own 2 hands. He built boats, he built furniture, he loved to cook, he loved to bake. He was an amazing father. He knew everything there was to know about jazz. But what was really extraordinary about him was he was so humble. He never thought anything was a big deal. And he shared his gifts with everyone, family, friends. And when I would say to the neighbors, this was his favorite neighborhood he ever lived in, they would say, "We weren't a neighborhood until Bill got here." So early in our relationship, maybe midway through, I started worrying a lot about the future. Where are we going in a year, 5 years, that kind of thing. And I went to a 10-day meditation retreat, which nobody thought I would get all the way through it. But during that, I realized it didn't matter because I'd already seen a lot in life and I'd always eventually been okay. So when I came back, I stopped worrying about the future and I just really loved everything about our day-to-day, which was always the way he thought about life. So the beauty in our relationship was like the beautiful food he made for us and the way we would swap stories about our clients at the end of the day and give some of them like maybe some less generous nicknames like Dimwit and Eeyore and Hookers and Blow and things like that. But to be fair, that wasn't a judgment. That was like a quote he heard his clients say, "Don't invite him, he's all about hookers and blow." So that's where that one came from. But it was just, we laughed so much and so often. We didn't try to change each other. We really just wanted each other's happiness as much as our own. So it was in the way he warmed my side of the bed every night, and we took turns bringing each other coffee in the morning. And so I really just learned how to be in the present and not worry about the future. But then all of a sudden there wasn't a future to worry about. It was just a normal day in August. We said goodbye in the morning with a hug and a kiss. And sometime that afternoon when he was alone in his home office, he just collapsed. Even though he was only 60 and in perfect health, his heart decided to stop. So if there's such a thing as grieving well, I'm going to say I've been doing it. I'm closer than ever to his family, closer to my friends than ever, all of these kinds of things. But there are times when, like once, soon after he died, I was driving through the back hills in Oregon, and there was this incredible sunset sky full of reds and oranges and yellows and all my favorite colors. And I just put my head down and cried and wanted it to go away because I thought, if he can't see it, if Bill can't see this, I don't want to see it either. But there are days when my heart can't really get me through, but luckily my head can. And so I'm definitely moving in the direction that's generally known as forward. And I know I have a lot to live for. But one of the ways I sometimes indulge myself in a little bit of escapism is watching these Korean dramas. Now, I don't usually watch anything scary. I watch romantic comedies, I watch period pieces, I watch cop shows, but zombies and gore are not my thing. But I wanted to watch something with this one actor, and the only thing left on Netflix was this apocalyptic show called Sweet Home, where people are spontaneously turning into monsters and eating each other, and it's like a lot of blood and gore, and there's this sketchy apartment building that everybody is holed up in. And I started watching it, and I really wasn't enjoying it, but I couldn't give it up because I was vested in these characters. So I had these coping mechanisms. I'd like put it on a faster speed, or I'd look at the little thumbnails at the bottom to see how long a scene was going to last. Sometimes I checked email on my phone while a gruesome scene was finishing up. And I just couldn't stop it. And a few times I stopped mid-episode, I said, that's it, I'm all done. But then I'd go back and binge watch like 3 episodes a couple days later. So I'm into the 3rd season of this show. And there's these 2 characters there's a young woman and this man, and they have this complicated relationship, and they've been on the outside fending for themselves in a beat-up car and a beat-up trailer. And they've made a pact that if one of them starts turning into a monster, the other one will kill him, which a lot of characters have that pact. So the man starts turning, but the young woman cannot get herself to kill him. So he runs his car before he's fully a monster into a wall. It bursts into flames. He dies because fire is one of the few things that actually kills monsters. So the next day she goes to the car, burnt out car, and his charred body was still behind the steering wheel. Stay with me. And she sits down and she starts apologizing to him that she wasn't able to kill him, and starts walking away. And as she's walking away, she hears one word. He says, Hania. And I hadn't noticed up until that, even in 3 seasons, that her name was Hania. Maybe he didn't say it. But anyway, that's all he says. And she comes back and she looks into the car, and now he's there in his human self again. And he smiles at her sweetly, and he says, live a good life. And she says, I will. So I sat in my apartment and watched that scene I don't know how many times. And it was my name, and it was live a good life in the subtitle every single time. And I thought, that's what Bill did. That's what I would have wanted him to do if the tables had been turned. That is absolutely what he would say to me if he could. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Oh my God, Hania, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your story, being so open with us. But before we continue, would you please introduce yourself for people listening at home and get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, sure. My name is Hania. I was born and raised in the United States, but my parents were immigrants from Syria in the 1960s. I worked a bunch of different jobs as an engineer and software, as a lawyer, and then a real estate agent. I have one son, and we both moved to Europe about a little bit less than a year ago.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, as you may know, we are a What Lingers podcast, and we have so many lingering questions about your story. So, yeah, thank you for wanting to open a little bit more about your story.
My pleasure.
And how was that for you to watch back? Is it the first time you've watched it back since you told the story?
I've watched it back a few times when I sent it to other people. I still get pretty emotional when I listen to it, for sure.
I totally I get emotional, and I've now listened to it quite a few times actually, and each time it really touches me. And the night that you told it, we were in the front row and I could feel the room. I was very emotional, and my husband was in the row behind me, and I remember looking back at him, and like he was super emotional, and it connected us in a way. We talked about it afterwards. And there was a way in which you shared your love for Bill with the whole room, and you did it. I don't know, it was very magical. And I know it was the first time you'd told a story, a personal story, right, in front of an audience.
Yeah, that's the first time I'd ever told a story in front of an audience. Yeah, I've spoken in front of audiences for work, but I've never told a personal story like that.
Yeah, it was just very, very touching. And my first lingering question is, of course, like, I want the meeting. Like, how did you and Bill originally meet?
So we originally met, our kids were on the same soccer team. And I went to the first parent meeting with a friend of mine, and we swore we were not going to volunteer for anything. But of course, I volunteered for the biggest job. And so I had to coordinate with all the parents. And so he was one of the parents. And so we started talking that way. And then just different connections got made. And So that's kind of how it started. But had I not volunteered for that job, I'm sure I wouldn't have for a team.
As you guys got to know each other sort of through this shared work, was there like one moment where it suddenly became romantic, or like a moment where he asked you out on a date or something?
Yeah, no, there was. I mean, we were friends for years, and I honestly didn't think of us as being a couple at all. And then years later, there was just this moment for him, and he sent me this email that he obviously agonized overnight about. And he was saying, he kept going back and forth. Should I say it? Should I say it? Should I not say it? And he said, okay, I'm going to say it because we tell each other everything. I have this crush on you, but it's going to go away. And our friendship is the most important thing. It was number one. And it's funny because I read it and I didn't know how to answer. And he said, I hope it doesn't put you off, but it's going to be okay. Our friendship is going to be okay. And so I tried to figure out how to respond. And I responded, I hope it doesn't put you off, that it doesn't put me off. And
I love that.
yeah, and he had referred to it as pulling back the curtain, and it actually became like our unofficial anniversary. We referred to it as Curtain Day. And within a couple weeks, we were actually talking about spending the rest of our lives together. We had such a great friendship that had been forged without any of the other stuff of dating, that we just knew each other really well. So it was really, really magical.
I love this idea of curtain day. And also, I feel like that is kind of this common story where you have this best friend and you develop a crush on them. And then you're like, but I can't risk it to tell them. And then he risked it. And then you risked it. And then sometimes it doesn't go that well. Sometimes it goes the opposite. And so, how long in the end were you guys together before he passed away?
We were only technically dating for 3.5 years before he died, which a lot of people sometimes look at and they're like, oh, it's not that long. And it's like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with the length of time. I mean, we'd both been through so much in our lives, and it was like, we got it. We finally got it. And we were so clear that we had got it. And we were just so, so happy. I was really honored that his family, his own kids, and his best friends, after he died, would thank me and say, thank you for giving him the happiest years of his life, which was just like, I don't even know how to, that's just everything to me. So,
Yeah. And I mean, and it sounds like I think it went both ways, right? A bit. I mean,
oh, without a doubt. It's like, now I understand what love is.
That's amazing. So sweet. I love this love story in Hania. I know we were there watching you live, and people in the audience were sobbing and tearing from your story because it's such a, I mean, it's one of those stories that seem also impossible to happen. And then, of course, it happened. But what struck me the most were the coincidences. And you mentioned this word, and you did say, I'm not a person who believes in coincidences. And I'm coming from a scientific background as well. You also have something in that field. How is your relationship with this kind of fate and destiny after all these events that you share with us during your story? Do you think have changed? I mean, just starting with your son's soccer team, which is such a great coincidence, and then everything that you share after that, it just making me think about how our lives might be written.
Yeah, no, I think about it a lot because I do come kind of from a more analytical side, but I don't necessarily believe in a specific higher powers. But I do just marvel. I continue to marvel at the coincidences that happened all the way up until and since then. I go back and forth. I feel like maybe it's what we look for, or maybe these things are all around us and we choose what to see. But I must admit that with Bill and my relationship with him, it's just such a crazy number of coincidences. I guess the way I look at it is I don't necessarily need to know the meaning of them, but they can still be very important and touching. And to me, maybe that's the most important piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what the meaning you give to these events and what they mean to you and in terms of your relationship.
I don't know, the story about it's 3 photos, right, on his Facebook, and they've been posted on his Facebook for a long time, and it was before you guys knew each other. And then you're going through it and you see your son, and this is before they're on the same team and before all of that, right? So you guys are completely strangers.
Well, what did you like? Do you feel in those? Did you feel in that moment like, oh, is the universe trying to give me some message, or is it, or do you feel like, oh no, this is really the person, or somehow we're entangled? I mean, I guess I don't know that it's necessarily the universe telling me anything, but it's just kind of like you take a step back, like you're outside of it, and it's almost like you're watching a movie and you realize we were on this path to meet each other. And we were even on this path for the way things lined up before he died, like in the months before he died. There's so many crazy things that happened. I'll just give you an example. I never knew, all those years, I never knew the code for his phone and never needed it or asked for it. And 2 days before he died, his daughter was flying back from Germany and he was far from his phone, but I saw that she texted, "Is there food at home when I get there?" And he said, "Yes, there is." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I need to know the code on your phone." And so he told me. And had I not had that code 2 days later, his kids and I wouldn't have been able to do anything. I mean, it's like it was all laid out, but I don't necessarily attribute it to higher power. Crazy.
Yeah, it's like you don't need to make some big story meaning for it, but at the same time, it means something kind of.
But yeah, there's a zillion things. He saw my son. He hadn't seen my son for 3 years. We went to celebrate my son's birthday in California 1 week before he died. So my son got to see him. I mean, it's incredible. The list of coincidences is amazing.
I was thinking about the last coincidence that we have from you in the story, your name being in this show. I got curious, like now knowing that your family comes out from Syria, I'm assuming that your name comes also from this side of the world. But have you ever gone afterwards, like if it's means something for Korean culture, and if you know what your name means?
Oh, yeah. I haven't looked up what it means in Korean, but I do know what it means in Arabic. And it's kind of funny that you asked that question because it actually means someone who is content. So I guess that kind of fits the whole idea as well, since that's, been a lifelong goal and is very much my goal now to just live life fully.
I mean, that must have just been shocking to hear your name in the Korean drama.
It's a very noisy show and blood and gore and all stuff. And it was a very rare, quiet moment in this show. I watched things very intently, like my eyeballs dry out. I remember to blink and it was so quiet. And then it was just like my name coming out through the television. Not that this whole interview should be about coincidences, but another coincidence happened that I sent the link for my story to a dear friend of mine from high school whose profession is in special effects. And he said that he and his studio worked on the first season of that show.
So every path you take leads back somehow.
It's bananas. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit still. Well, like what's going on here?
And something that, of course, is connected with your story. And you mentioned that you were grieving well. And you gave it a little bit of examples, like you're talking to his family. But I'm wondering what this means to you. Because grief is such personal experience, of course, for humans. But I wonder why you bring this to the story or how you relate to this.
Yeah. And I mean, Bill is really the first person that was so close to me that I lost. So I really learned a lot about grief, and especially traumatic grief and sudden grief are different. And what I found is that before I started like intellectually learning about what I should do, my inclinations for what to do were kind of spot on. Like, I wrote about him a lot. I started doing a lot more physical activity and playing tennis. I was cooking for his kids constantly. And so I think that there were those technical things because I really walked around for a while, not really knowing what was going on. But maybe the most important part about grief is that, like, I've embraced it, like I don't apologize to people for crying. I mean, once in a while I do if it's at a weird moment, but I'm really like, I also found, for example, there was a person in my family who had never really embraced my relationship. And my first inclination was to tell them, to send a message to them to not call me, because it was almost like I was protecting my grief. It was so important that I honor it and really experience it fully. And I think that that's been really, really helpful. So I'm lucky that my inclinations, I think, have been good ones, and connecting with other people as well that were in grief. And you just realize so many, most people have experienced something, they just don't necessarily talk about it. And it's really helpful for me and for other people to talk about it.
Your story was you sort of sharing your grief story with the whole room. And what part does doing that, telling that story on the stage, did that in some way transform your own personal grief? Did that do anything that surprised you by sharing it in such a large format?
Yeah, I think because I was a little bit nervous and stuff, I wasn't as aware of the room as I became more aware of it later. But I think what it did for me is like, I remember one of the things I wrote very early on, because I do write a lot about Bill because he was so beautiful. And I remember one of the things I wrote was, long after anybody wants to hear about you, I am going to write you beautifully. And so I just feel like he was such a beautiful person that I felt like it was a gift that I got to talk about him to those people. I feel like there's a way I don't want him to just be gone and his presence to just disappear. There's still stuff that can happen in the world because of who he was. It was really wonderful to be able to do that. At least it came across the way I had hoped. So.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. And now I'm so much happier that we're doing this because, in a way, we are honoring Bill with this episode for everyone who listens and to get to know a little bit of Bill and people who know him as well. From listening to your story and your description from Bill, I felt that he was such a light in the world. So I'm really, really happy that we're doing this today.
Him, whether they knew him or they didn't know him. I mean, sometimes people will say, he's here with you. Like somebody who got the video was like, he was there with you. And it doesn't really matter whether I believe that literally or not, because if that moves other people, and that's the beauty of it, is that we can all do these things in our own way. And his presence meant different things to different people, but he was just really incredibly, incredibly giving.
That sort of brings me to, I think there was one moment that really touched me. And in watching it back, I just sort of like flooded with emotion. And that is when you talk about watching the sunset and the sunset being so strikingly beautiful, and then putting your head down and crying and being like, if he can't see it, I don't want to either. And there's something about the way that you describe that, but it also, I think it's this nod to something that comes up earlier in the story, which is the F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, which I had done everything on earth with you. It's about how much love is really about finding this person that you want to share experience with. And I think sometimes we talk about love in these sort of like lofty ways, or butterflies, or feelings, or all of these things, but it comes down almost to these like daily routines, the joy of just, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, there are a lot of reasons I wasn't necessarily in healthy relationships early in my life. One of them is that I think I was expecting it to be something really big, or I don't know what I expected, but I didn't appreciate the small things in life. In that part of the relationship where I was starting, like, is this it? Is this not it? And I think at first I didn't value those small things. Then I realized that those small things are everything. They are everything. It's coming home and talking to somebody and they want to listen to you. Or he would text me on my way and say, which cocktail do you want? And greet me at the door. And it was laughing. And it was so, I think it took until this age for me to realize what's important. And it's the small things. I remember one time, because I was less secure than he was. And I just said to him once, I'm like, it's been a long time since you told me you loved me. And he just looked at me and he goes, really? Is that what you heard? It was like, he didn't indulge me, but I knew that what he was saying is like, it's not even about the words. I'm telling you, I love you all the time. And so, yeah, it was that. So it is hard, I will say, not sharing things. Like there's still things I see and things I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell Bill there's like this near and this here. And, but I'm kind of in my heart say, oh, I would have shared that with him. Or I say, oh, he would have loved that. And you just keep going. But it was really hard at the beginning to experience any beauty because I missed him even more. I was very, very lucky. Just completely changed my life for the better.
And sometimes it takes time in life to get to that point where love is not as loud. I'm the same as you. I think I thought love was more dramatic or something, but the quietness is everything.
It really is.
And that really came through in the way that you described your relationship with him.
Yeah. And I think he always appreciated little things. Like it was all about the detail and all about the small gestures that were so numerous that they just added up to this, amazing life. So yeah, he was a very humble guy. Like I would say all the time, like nobody does that. And he'd be like, it's just what I do. He would probably hate this.
Oh, like the podcast? Yeah, like, oh, like we're memorializing you in a podcast.
Yes. Bill, I am pushing my appreciation out for you into the world as far as I possibly can.
That's good. Like sometimes those really humble people, they need that loud cheerleader.
Exactly.
But that reminds me, in some ways you described the two of you a bit different, that he was really into the moment and into like appreciating the day, and that you were sort of like really future focused. And you went on the 10-day meditation retreat, which I think was Vipassana, right? So maybe you could explain what Vipassana is for people that don't know. And then I'm curious why no one thought you could survive, and if Bill thought you could survive the 10 days of silence.
Bill definitely did not think I would survive. It started on a Monday. And when I called him on my way home 10 days later, he was like, I thought you were going to be here Wednesday, like 2 days after. So no, he didn't. So I'm not an expert in Vipassana, but I had an amazing therapist who tried to convince me for years to go. And I didn't go until later, but it's basically 10 days of meditation and focusing on your breath. It's really about getting to a place of quiet that you don't necessarily get to in a shorter period of time. And the funny thing about that line is that when I first wrote it, there were paragraphs about that. But it just by coincidence, Bill and I had kind of come to that thinking about the future kind of thing just before the retreat happened. And when I went into the retreat, I had like this decision tree in my head. And it was like, okay, if this and then that. And I was like, no, you're supposed to be clearing your head. So I clear my head. And then 2 days later, I'd have another decision tree in my head, but it'd be simpler. And then I'd be like, okay, clear it out. And then after 10 days, I got out. And the first call I made was actually to a dear friend of mine who was always my reality check before I addressed anything with Bill. And I called him up and I said, I figured it out. I figured it out, because he knew I was thinking about it. And he was like, what is it? What is it? I said, it doesn't matter, because it's all going to be okay. No matter what, we can spend, the rest of our lives together, or we cannot. And I think at that moment, like our relationship just took on a different level. So it's the classic, you let it go and then it grows. So that retreat was just what I needed. I'm not necessarily going to do it again, but it was exactly I needed it.
And I've never done it, but I've had friends, and I'm always amazed. No speaking is one thing. No phones, obviously.
No.
But also no reading.
No reading, no phones. You're not even supposed to have eye contact with other people. Yeah. And there were moments when I was like, oh, this is cool. I got this. And then there were other moments where I was like, I still have my car key. I can bust out of here. You just go through so many different emotions. And sometimes the hour goes like that. And sometimes you're like, I swear to God, I've been sitting here for 3 hours. The goal is for you to be totally not paying attention to anything outside of you. And at the same time, like quieting your mind and your thoughts. So nobody thought I would get through it, because I talk so much, and it was really weird coming back into the world, because it's like, wow, it's really noisy out here. So they give you half a day there talking to adjust, so you don't just get thrown back into the world. So I recommend it.
Yeah. And it's free.
Yeah, it's free. I have done it in Brazil, and when you mentioned it, I went back there. Well, I'm wondering if you think Bill was a little bit spiritual, because all the things that you're talking, like being present, the little details, you don't need to be inside of any institution or religion to be spiritual.
No, because for a few reasons, like his father was a Presbyterian minister.
Oh, okay.
So he was a preacher's kid, as they say at PK. And so we actually talked about spirituality and things like that a lot. Ironically, my dear friend asked him at our last dinner together, point blank. He said, Bill, what do you think happens after you die? And Bill went, nothing, like that, like immediately. And so I think he was very much about living life to the fullest, but I don't think he thought there was anything after we go. And I don't think he thought there was anything that is controlling us or whatever. It's funny. He didn't necessarily believe that, but I think he lived like that. And it's just how some people who claim to be religious actually don't follow the principles. I happen to be an atheist, and I think atheists are some of the most principled people there are. The night that he died, and it was crazy with the paramedics coming and all of this stuff happening, I think it was the police who said to me, the next thing they'll do is they'll send a chaplain. And I looked at him and I said, do not send a chaplain. That's the only thing that would make this night worse. Because I just knew that Bill would not have wanted that. The last thing that he would have wanted was that. I think he just was exposed to too much hypocrisy.
I wonder if your relationship with that belief changes after all of you share with us. Like the coincidence of the episode, fate, used to believe that nothing happens after we die.
I don't think I know all the answers, but I don't feel like I'm more spiritual or more religious. I care about these things very much, and I care about important things and being good people and honesty and taking care of our fellow human beings. And I believe very strongly in all of those things, but I don't necessarily ascribe it to a specific spirituality or deity or anything.
And what's the draw to Korean dramas?
That's a really good question.
Do you have any background, like, do you have any relationship to Korea at all? Or what is it about that I want to know the draw?
My sister was the first one to start watching them, and then she suggested that I watch one. They're fun to watch, and they have good storylines, and there's such a huge range of them. Oh, they're just kind of addictive. You get into these stories, and you want to know what happens next, like, I guess, any other genre, but yeah, and the people are beautiful. That doesn't hurt. And they have beautiful clothes. I don't know.
Do you watch them in Korean with English subtitles?
Yeah. And I've watched enough now that I'm starting to pick up a few words of Korean here and there for sure.
Oh, cool.
It's a good way to learn.
Yeah.
You mentioned actually that you were looking for series with this specific actor. Is there any specific reason? Maybe he's good looking. You just mentioned that they're good looking people.
Yeah, I mean, he's attractive. There's no doubt about that for me. But yeah, no, he was just an actor who was attractive, and I'd seen him in other series, and I had really liked him. I was like, yeah, I haven't seen one with this guy for a while. So I was just doing a search, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a zombie one, but all right, I'll give it a go. And yeah, I can't believe I watched all 3 seasons, every single episode. I can't believe that. So
we all giggled when you were like, I'm fast forwarding through all the gore and core. And then you're like, and I made it to season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of this. I mean, one of the things I did with Bill's kids after he died, they love scary movies. And we would go on Tuesday nights to scary movies. I would go with them. And I hate scary, gory movies. And I would just be like, looking off on the side or going like this while they're just super gory. And I just said to them, I'm like, I only do this because I love you so much that I will go to scary movies with you. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Do you like scary movies, Cristian?
I used to watch scary movies when I was younger, and I used to love them. But as I grew, I stopped doing them because I consider them food from my soul. Like everything we consume is kind of nurturing us. And one healer once told me, like, everything you consume, it's feeding you. And recently I tested that theory. I started watching The Boys, this series that is very gory. I started having so much nightmares about killing people or murders. And it was just so distressing. And your body physiologically goes into a stress response. So I'm avoiding everything that activates my body in that sense. But Hania, thank you so much. We've been having such an amazing time with you and talking about Bill and, Korean soap operas, but we have to go. And for the last question, we're wondering how it was for you to revisit your story and today talking about Bill again. How is this experience for you?
Yeah, it's, I do love talking about Bill, and there's some days when it makes me really emotional. And I'm getting to the place where it's more and more just like kind of a happy thought kind of thing. So it varies from day to day, and it hits you at random moments when you're not expecting it. So I think on this particular day, it kind of makes me happy. Because it makes me feel close to all of those memories.
That that's it for this episode of What Lingers.
Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And also follow us on Instagram at Storytelling Lisboa to keep up to date.
What Lingers is a podcast from the team behind Storytelling Lisboa and is produced by Jonny Bunyan. He's amazing.
Thank you so much for listening and join us again for another edition of What Lingers.
See you next week.